Elon Musk just called Trump's tax bill a debt slavery plan. And Trump fired right back, saying that Musk is just upset because he lost some tax credits. So as a result, markets start spiraling, going up and down. So what does this mean for your money? Well, in this video, I'm going to be breaking it down and showing you exactly how smart investors play volatile markets. Let's jump in. Now, as always, I would love it if you could like this video and subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate that. So what's actually going on? You might have heard, you might have seen the news, and you might have seen little banners like this where it's Donald Trump versus Elon Musk, and there's a big public feud going on in mainly social media. Let's take a look. So I have a couple of snapshots here. Trump tariffs, Elon saying that these tariffs will cause a recession, Trump going back and forth. Each of these are typically on their own respective social media platforms. So it's a pretty public feud, right? And finally, I have a timeline here for you. So it's actually broken down day by day and actually what happened, right? So a lot of this started in April where Musk starts criticizing White House officials. You can see what actually happened. He was blasting Peter Navarro on X, of course, right? Giving him some not so nice names, as you can see here. I'll let you read through this on your own time. But anyway, so this is a pretty heated timeline all the way until about June 5th, which is just a few days ago at the time of this recording, where you can see that this all led to a very public fallout between Musk and Trump, where Musk actually starts calling for impeachment of Trump. And then Trump, of course, retaliates by saying he's going to threaten contracts with Musk. You can see the rest here in this description. I have a couple of more points on this, but let's jump in because I don't want to waste too much time on this. So what is the result of this very public feud? This here is the Tesla shares over the last couple of months, so roughly a year, last July to currently June at the time of this video. What can you see? So this period, right, this here's the presidential election. So I'm going to put a little election blurb here. And we can see as the election started and Musk was on the Trump campaign, there's something called the Trump bump. At least that's what the media calls it, right? So you can see that the shares of Tesla actually increased in value during Donald Trump's presidential campaign and ultimately win in the election. However, then as we saw, going back up here to the timeline, starting in early April, we can go here to the Tesla stocks and we see once again in early April, things start going a little bit volatile. In fact, we could see the volatility a little bit even before that public fallout. So maybe this might suggest that things might have not been all too hot between the two political figures or just really figures in the United States even before then. So as you can see, the stocks have seen quite a bit slide, and I have actual quantification in a couple of minutes that I'll show you. The point being, these gains from the Trump bump were essentially slashed, and we're looking now at June, to virtually before the election actually was official, right? Maybe a little bit higher than before the election, but the point is Tesla lost a lot of money, as did Elon Musk. In fact, about $150 billion were wiped from Tesla in the last couple of months, mainly due to this very heated public debate and the results that followed. So why should you even care about this public debate? It's really, two pretty large, well-known figures that arguably have an ego going at it in public. So why should you care about it? There's a couple of reasons. There's three to be specific. First, Tesla stock. If you're invested in Tesla stock, this very public debate could impact you for the better or for the worse, and we'll go into that in a second. The S&P 500, as you guys know, I am very much a proponent of the S&P 500, and I've seen volatility in this as well. Recent days suggest it's actually been pretty good for the S&P 500, but if we scroll back and rewind a couple of weeks ago, it was not too hot for the S&P 500, so it's pretty volatile. And then the crypto market, so I'll share a little bit about that as well. So first, let's actually take a look here. On Reuters magazine, we can see how the Trump-Musk feud has really been hurting the stock market. So this is alluding to the S&P 500. Tesla, of course, that individual stock, which makes up just about 1.5% of the S&P 500 in total, plummets about 14%, which can certainly cause some volatility and aftershock effects and ripple effects in the S&P 500 itself. But here we're looking at Tesla, the actual individual stock, plummeting 14%. The lowest it went was about 17%. But in this edition of Forbes magazine, it went down 14%, 11th worst day ever. And this is also due to this feud with Trump. And then finally, you can see how their public feud also impacts the crypto markets, where there was a crypto market crash, $278 million pulled from Bitcoin ETFs alone. So clearly this public feud is hurting investors across a pretty large spectrum, whether you're individual investors in individual stocks like Tesla, whether you're pretty broad ETF market investors like me in the S&P 500, or whether you're crypto investors, you would have probably felt some sort of ripple effect. Now here, I thought this was interesting to show as well, the fear and greed index right now in the crypto market especially, we're sensing a lot of fear. Why? Because of this feud partly the feud. And this fear is leading people to sell. And that is why you saw this headline here with this crypto market crash, because people are afraid. They sense fear. And you can see here right now, it's pretty much the lowest it's ever been when it comes to this fear and greed index predictor. And we can see the numbers here, 45. I don't know exactly how these numbers are measured, in which survey capacity, but just judging from everything I've been reading, which has been a lot, there is quite a bit of fear in the markets. However, have you seen this chart before? You probably have if you've been following my videos. This here is a chart by a book called The Behavior Gap. I very much love this book. It's a pretty light read by Carl Richards. Anyway, this author, Carl Richards, he does a lot of napkin drawings. And this is one of his napkin drawings, which shows literally the steps to get broke, for lack of better words. How to get broke, how to lose all your money, right? So how do you do this? When the markets go up, you're very greedy, you want to buy more. And when the markets go down and they're volatile, that's when you start selling. You're locking in your losses. You're locking in your crypto losses. And that is what we do not want to see, okay? So this is not the right move. And this is typically what people do, and they repeat this until they lose all their money. This is what we want to avoid, okay? So this is a perfect sense of what not to do. And unfortunately, a lot of people are doing exactly this in the crypto markets along with the other ETF markets. So what does this mean for you? First of all, markets, they absolutely hate uncertainty. When they see, and I'm going to zoom in on this, so you're looking at just this here. The markets, they really hate uncertainty. And the reason why is because markets, they have a certain amount of uncertainty already built into the prices. But when there are external factors like two very public figures feuding and dueling it out on their own respective social media platforms, on TV, etc., that's not necessarily a good thing, right? Whether it's for them, for their companies, for the country, etc. So that builds a lot of additional uncertainty that the market hasn't factored in previously into its prices. And that additional uncertainty in such a short period of time that has been relatively not factored into the game, at least not for my part, that can leave a little bit of volatility happening in the market. So that's why you're seeing a lot of volatility in the markets right now. And second, when two massive influencers with arguably pretty big egos clash publicly, it also sends investors into panic. Cue this chart again. When people start to be panic or feeling panic, then they typically go into panic selling because it's driven by fear, also known as panic. They don't want to lose their money, and so what do? They sell instead of buying more at the dip, which is typically what the long-term, rather smart investor would do to play the volatility game. So that panic isn't always rational. In fact, there's a saying that most investors, actually all investors that are human, not algorithmic trading, they are irrational investors. Why? Because we act on something called emotion. It's what makes us really human, right? But that emotion is causing us to be irrational and essentially lose money in the markets. Smart investors know that you shouldn't be irrational, know that you can't really put emotion into the mix. And what would they do? What would I do in this situation? I personally would stay invested and dollar cost average on. So this is pulled from the British monarchy back during, I believe it was World War II, when they built these signs, keep calm and carry on, during the war. And so I am just saying, this is not war, of course, thankfully, but it's essentially a feud, like it's a social war, if you will, like on social media between two large and well-known personalities. What should you do as the investor? Stick to your plan. Don't panic sell. Don't panic fear sell, unless there's some sort of other extenuating circumstance. However, if this is just based on what's happening right now between these two individuals, focus on your goal, right? If your goal was to stay invested for the long term, keep pursuing that goal. Markets will readjust at some point. So what is Trump's proposed BBB? This here is the Big Beautiful Bill, also known as the OBBB, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. So let's just say that this here has not been fully passed yet. It has passed the House, but there's a couple of additional steps that it has to go through before being officially signed into law. So it's essentially known as the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act version 2.0. The TCJA was from, I believe the year was 2017 during the first Trump administration. It made a lot of changes in the overall tax picture for individuals, for companies, and really for America. And so this here is a slightly revised Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Some points here include bonus depreciation. We'll go into that in a second. No tax on tips. I think this was very well pronounced between both candidates during the presidential run. I believe Kamala Harris as well as Trump shared their views that they did not want tax on tips. So this has been coming for a while now, regardless of party. And then finally, military and border spend. That's another point. But those are three relatively main points. And then some in-depth information. Skadden, ARPS. This is a very well-known law firm in the United States. And it just kind of typed up some of the insights on the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And you can see here for individuals, we're looking at the SALT Act. So this is the state and local tax, right? That's what it stands for, state and local tax cap. And so it just discusses how it increases individual deduction cap for special taxes. You can go in on this on your own, but I did want to show you a couple of excerpts here from Skadden. I think they did a very good job finding some key pieces of information and translating that into relatively understandable terms for the typical person who doesn't necessarily understand law speak. So take a look at their article. This goes into more depth. But overall, what does this mean for you, the investor? It means that there might be short-term boosts for the economy, right? So this is going back to the individual, where individual deduction caps for specified taxes are actually increased. So this is a good thing. That means you can save money, at least for this particular point. However, some argue that this is maybe more short-term than long-term. And the counter argument to that would be that there is potential for long-term debt. Of course, no one really knows the exact quantification, how much long-term debt would there be, but some folks, including Elon Musk, say that there will be a lot of long-term debt. Some predict between 2.4 trillion to 4 trillion or more dollars in potential debt added to the national debt level, which is already extremely high. I have a quick model showing you here in a couple of minutes how that could actually impact the overall level of national debt. So we have some articles saying that the bill would add, again, to the U.S. debt level. Others, so the White House, for example, I'm just trying to show you both sides to the coin, to the argument. The White House here, of course, shares their point of view by listing, what's been being said and then what the facts are on the White House website. So wanted to show these 2 points of view. And then Musk's rebuttal and political fallout. Again, Elon Musk is not a fan of this bill, saying that it is the debt slavery bill, like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, containing the largest increase in debt ceiling in the history. So Elon's very much lobbying to kill the bill. And here is a chart of what Statista, this statistics website, predicts might happen to the overall debt ceiling. Again, no one really knows. This here is just a prediction. But as you can see, the prediction here is a pretty stark increase in the current level of debt. So take that with a grain of salt, of course. No one really knows where we'll be in 8 years from now, let alone in one. So, but this is good information to know. So what does this actually mean? We know that there's a lot of back and forth. We know some people say one thing, others say another thing, but what does it mean for you? Musk, it's good to understand how Musk perceives this information. He sees the bill is undoing months of tax cuts, right? So if you remember, Musk was responsible for something called the DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. So his department was really focused on cutting any excessive costs. And in his eyes, this bill would add more costs because of potential increased deduction allowances. So you can't collect as much taxes. That's just a small example. He's furious, so this is what Trump believes. Musk is furious because Tesla could lose $7,500 in tax credit per car, essentially. Doesn't really sound good, but there is another thought process here. By removing this electric vehicle credit, it might actually hurt Tesla's competitors more. So Tesla, as you may know, is one of the, or if not the largest electric vehicle manufacturer in the world, really, right? And, or at least especially in the US. And so Tesla is it already is producing a lot. It has kind of its supply chain down. It's making some sort of money, right? And its competitors are not producing electric vehicles in the same capacity and scale as Tesla. So what if this EV credit is eliminated? Yeah, sure, it'll hurt Tesla, but competitors from Tesla also rely on this $7,500 credit to make their EVs more affordable to the public as an alternative to Tesla. And if this bill or if this credit is eliminated, then these competitors, they still lose money on each EV that they sell, which means that they will likely go into bankruptcy, or at least they're going to be losing a lot of money. Tesla might actually gain market share. So if these go out of business, right? So if the competitors, if they go out of business and they drop out of the market because they can't afford to produce EVs anymore, Tesla might actually gain market share as others drop out of the market and become really the dominant player. I mean, it already is the dominant player, but there are alternatives like Rivian, for example, in the US markets. And I'm sure there's many others outside internationally too, Chinese companies, for instance. So what, again, does this mean for you? Let's just get back to the main point that I really hope to drive home today in this video. Volatility means opportunity. Do not do this, what this chart shows. This is what we want to avoid, right? This here is exactly how you get broke, how you lose all your money. Volatility is opportunity. So what does that mean? That means either stay the course or stay invested, or it means buy the dip, okay? It does not mean to lose or to sell your money at the dip. We do not want to do this at all. We want to do the opposite. So again, if I am in this market right now, which is relatively volatile, and I am in this market, then there's a couple of things I would do. So again, ETF investing strategy, that would be my strategy. It's not super risky. I think it's, it's probably more on the conservative side. I'm not really looking at alternative assets. I'm not really looking at crypto right now. I'm really just focused on ETF investing. I do have alternatives outside, but if I was starting right now in my investing or just started a few months ago, I would protect myself through diversification. How? ETFs. They're cheap, they're simple, they're straightforward. It's a great tool. It really is a great tool. So my 4 favorite ETFs that I personally have, I focus on 4 sections. First, just the core US market. Again, I just want to access the 500 biggest blue chip companies in the US, which would be done by VOO. It's by Vanguard. Expense ratio is pretty low, 3 basis points, and it's a strong long-term performance. I'm not looking to outperform the market. I'm just looking to perform in line with the market. Then there's something growth focused. So of course I want to make some money down the road, right? Like I want it to grow too. So I would invest in this thing called QQQ. You might have heard of it. It's the top 100 companies in the NASDAQ. So a little bit more growth oriented, maybe tech, something of that nature. Expense ratio is a bit more expensive. This year's only 3 basis points, 0.03%. This year is 0.2%, a fifth of a percent. So 20 basis points, a little bit more expensive, but it might be justified by the higher return, potential return. There's also more volatility though, because again, it is growth focused. Then I would want some income focus ETF. So we're talking higher dividends. SCH is a good one. I think others have other ideas. If you have a favorite dividend one, feel free to share that in the comments. Expense ratio is 6 basis points and the yield is 3.5%. And the average yield is typically around 3% for a dividend stock. So this I'm happy about. It's just slightly better than average and it's good quality, which I'm happy with. And then finally, some international exposure. This V stands for Vanguard, and then X means accept, and the US, of course, that's the US. So Vanguard, accept US. I'm looking everything outside of the United States. Expense ratio is 5 basis points, and this is just looking at global diversification. I just want to be very well diversified. So finally, to wrap this up, markets will always have drama, whether it's Elon Musk, right? E versus DT. It's always going to have some sort of drama. It might be global. It might be unfortunately a war, right? With Russia invading Ukraine. There's just going to be drama. You have to just understand that and anticipate it. Your challenge, if you choose to accept, is to invest with 1, discipline, 2, to stay diversified, and 3, to zoom out. In other words, look at the long term. Okay, that's extremely important because when you look at your long-term goals, that's when you start realizing these intermittent daily fluctuations or maybe weekly fluctuations in the market, they're really not going to impact your long-term goal. If it's like 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now to retire or to, I don't know, buy a house or provide for your kids' education. The point is, make sure you zoom out. Don't just stay narrow focused and myopic for what's happening like today or next week. That's not what we want. And the most important thing is volatility does not equal risk. Volatility actually means opportunity, okay? So this is a time where you either just stay invested and don't do anything, or you also stay invested and actually buy a little bit more when it gets volatile, when there's a dip, when there's a low run. It does mean risk, however, when you panic sell. When you panic sell, that means you're putting your money at risk because you're locking in the losses, and we don't want that. So the most important thing, as I always say, is start building wealth now. The earlier you begin, the better your portfolio will look. So if you found this video helpful, please like this video and share with your friends to help others. And of course, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I would really appreciate that. And then join my newsletter. That newsletter is below in the link description. Your bank accounts will thank you later. Thanks so much, guys. Bye-bye.